Good morning, everyone. Today, our group will be presenting on the topic of movies, specifically focusing on two main areas, which is the evolution of movies over time and also the role of movies as a tool for language learning. So basically, we believe this topic is both interesting and relevant in this current era, not only because movies are a popular form of entertainment, but also because movies provide a meaningful insights into culture, language, and maybe human communication. As you all know, movies has been a part of human society for over a century. From the silent black and white films of the early 1900s to today modern society. So, high budget production and the film industry has continuously evolved to meet the changing tastes of its audience. So as we look at these evolutions, it is fascinating to see how storytelling methods, technology, and even the role of actors and directors have transformed. So I'll give you guys an example. So the early silent films relied entirely on visual expressions, exaggerated gestures, and intertitles to convey messages. Nowadays, modern movies combine visual effects, CGI, soundtracks, and some complex dialogue to create an immersive experience. What about you, Saief?
In my opinion, so basically first I want to say that that's right, Afif. And another important aspect is that movies nowadays, you can see it reflects society and culture in different periods. They also provide a window to the lifestyles, values, and social norms of the time. As we can see, classic Hollywood films often portray idealized versions of society with clear heroes and villains. Contemporary include messages about diversity, teamwork, and also resilience, which resonate with the modern audiences nowadays. And how about you, Soong?
Okay, so I can definitely see your point there. So I would like to present my point of view. And my perspective is that movies are not only for entertainment, because they also influence learning and personal development. As we will discuss later, movies can be a useful tool for language learning. Because you see, learners can observe real-life conversations, pick up natural phrases, and even improve pronunciation and listening skills. So in this way, movies serve as both a cultural and educational resource. And now moving on to my next point. I would like to say that right now, I'm giving it over to Afif.
Okay, thank you, Song. Now, by exploring the evolution of movies and their role in language learning, we aim to show that films are not just a passive form of entertainment. I believe that they engage viewers in multiple ways, either emotionally, cognitively, and even socially. So, for this forum, our goal is to examine these aspects thoroughly by providing examples from both classic and modern movies, as well as practical insights into how films can enhance language acquisition in today's era. Now I will pass it to Saief.
Okay. Moreover, we want to make our presentation interactive and relatable instead of just simply giving facts, but we will discuss, debate, and share our own perspective on the topic. For example, we might talk about how certain Marvel movies can teach teamwork and problem solving, or how some dialogues in everyday movies would help learners pick up conversational English naturally. And how about you, Soong? What do you think?
And finally, This topic also connects well with TESOL principles as it allows us to highlight authentic language use, as well as motivation and cultural context, all of which are key elements in language acquisition. So by the end of this forum, we hope everyone will appreciate not only the history and evolution of movies, but also their practical benefits in learning and teaching English. And right now, I'm giving it over to Afif.
Okay, thank you, Soong. So, with that, I believe is our time to start the discussion with the first part. So, the first part that we are going to discuss is the evolution of movies. So, let us explore how films have transformed over the years, shaping the way we experience stories and learn from them. So, now that we have introduced our topic, let us move to the evolution of movies, on how the history of cinema is fascinating because it shows how storytelling has changed over more than a century. Early films, which date back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, were silent and black and white. These films relied heavily on visual storytelling, exaggerated facial expressions, and gestures to convey emotion and plot. Even actors had to be extremely expressive because there was no sound to convey dialogue. And one famous example is The Birth of a Nation. It is a movie made in 1915, which despite its controversial content, demonstrates the early use of cinematic technique such as cross-cutting, close-up, and parallel editing to tell a story. Early directors like D.W. Griffith experimented with ways to guide the audience attention and create suspense, laying the foundation for modern filmmaking. It's interesting to think that movies back then were sometimes just a few minutes long, yet audience were completely captivated. What about you, Saief?
After hearing your point, yes, Afif, and the invention of sound or the talkies completely had transformed cinema in the late 1920s. For example, films like The Jazz Singer introduced synchronized sound and dialogue, making the viewing experience more realistic. And suddenly, actors' voices, tone, and inflection becomes part of the storytelling processes. Musical films also become extremely popular because sound allowed to directors to integrate songs directly into the narrative. For example, early musicals in Hollywood like 42nd Street, which introduced in 1933, combined catchy song with intricate choreography and dialogue. Actually, this changed the way movies were produced and consumed as audience began to expect more engaging audio-visual experiences, and it also actually had influenced acting style on how actors could now convey subtle emotions through their voices rather than relying only on gestures. So, how about you, Soong?
Well, that is a very fascinating perspective. I absolutely agree with it. So then came the introduction of color in films, which revolutionized storytelling. So Technicolor in the 1930s brought classics like The Wizard of Oz to life with vibrant visuals. Color allowed filmmakers to set moods, differentiate between settings, and create immersive cinematic worlds. And I will provide an example. The contrast between black and white Kansas and the colorful land of Oz actually reinforce the story themes of imagination and adventure. And another point is that this period marked the golden age of Hollywood, with directors experimenting with lighting, editing, and as well as camera angles. Alfred Hitchcock, for instance, used innovative camera techniques and suspense building strategies in films like Psycho, which was released in 1960, which have influenced generations of filmmakers. These developments highlight how movies evolve not just technologically, but also artistically. So, what about you, Afif?
Yes, I completely agree with you. Both Saief and Soong's point were something that I would think of. As technology advanced, so did audience expectation. By the mid 20th century, movies began to focus on large-scale productions and high budget and even more sophisticated storytelling. Blockbusters became a defining feature of modern cinema. Films like Star Wars, that was made in 1977, combined action, drama, and groundbreaking special effects to attract wide audiences. The idea of sequels and cinematic universes began taking shape during this era, laying the groundwork for franchises like the Marvel Cinematic Universes. Blockbusters also started to appeal to global audiences, using universal themes such as heroism, friendship, and adventure. This shift alone marked a transformation from simple narrative films to experiences that combine spectacle, technology, and emotional engagement. What do you think?
You're giving such a good point actually, Afif. And speaking of modern blockbusters, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a prime example of how movies have evolved from time to time. Actually, these films are not only technically advanced, but they also narratively complex. Characters develop over multiple movies, storylines are interconnected, and audiences are encouraged to follow each film closely to understand the larger narrative. If we don't follow each movies, it's hard for us to understand the storyline, what the story is. So we need to follow each story closely to understand the larger narrative. And actually, Marvel movies also include diverse characters and themes. If I'm not mistaken, it's relevant to today's society, such as teamwork, ethical dilemmas, and resilience. For instance, characters like Black Panther or Mrs. Marvel that bring cultural representation to the forefront, allowing audiences to connect with stories that reflect modern values, such as the Black Panther that it represents the country of Africa, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Well,
what do you think?
your point of view is very enlightening. So my perspective is that another major change is the accessibility of films, because previously audiences relied on cinemas, television, or even DVDs. But as we can see today, streaming platforms like Netflix, Disney Plus, and YouTube allow viewers to watch movies literally anywhere at any time.
It's much more popular, right?
Yes, and one important point is that this has also influenced the types of movies being produced, as studios now consider global audiences and cultural differences when creating content.
Exactly.
And technological advancements such as the CGI, motion capture, and 3D filming have further expanded what is possible. Audiences can now witness immersive worlds, lifelike characters, and visually stunning sequences in films, like as witnessed in Avengers Endgame or Avatar: The Way of Water. So these technologies, they push the boundaries of imagination and demonstrate how movies have evolved into these multi-sensory experiences. So, what do you think of my perspective, Afif?
Yes, That's a good point. I believe it's also important to note that storytelling itself has evolved. While early films focus on simple narrative and linear plots, modern movies often tackle complex themes like identity, diversity, social issues, and even ethical dilemmas. So the evolution reflects society growing awareness and demands for inclusive and meaningful content. So, for instance, the Marvel films integrate humor, such as Spider-Man is a humorous character that Marvel has made, and
Spider-Man is actually my favorite character in Marvel.
Yes.
Same here, same here.
so dia. Not only that, the Marvel film also integrate emotional depth and social commentary. Characters often face moral choices, personal struggles, or question about responsibility, making the stories relatable and engaging for audience of all ages. So this demonstrates that movies are not just for entertainment. They are a reflection of culture, society, and human experiences. Yeah, what do you think?
Moreover, different genres has actually evolved in unique ways, like horror, science fiction, or sci-fi and fantasy films now actually rely heavily on special effects and technology, while comedies and dramas emphasize dialogue, character development, and situational humor when they need to perform it like spontaneously. And the diversity and genres also allows filmmakers to experiment with variety of storytelling techniques and give audience a wide range of whole new experiences.
Yeah, that's a good point. So what about you?
Well, now that I've listened to all your points, so allow me to provide a summary of all your points. So, the big gist is that the evolution of movies show a continuous interplay between technology, storytelling, as well as audience expectations. From silent black and white films to modern blockbusters like the Marvel movies, films have adapted to cultural and technological changes. So now today we can see that movies combine narrative, visual spectacle, sound and social relevance to create immersive experiences that entertain, educate and inspire. So with this understanding, we can now move on to part 3, where we will discuss movies as a tool for language learning. In order to connect directly to lesson principles and demonstrating how films go beyond entertainment. So, I guess I shall give it over to Afif.
Okay. So now that we have discussed how movies have evolved over time, let us move on to the second aspect of our topic, which is movies as a tool for language learning. So, in today's educational context, especially in English language teaching, movies are increasingly being used as an effective learning resources. I believe one of the main reasons for this is the fact that movies provide a more authentic language input. Unlike textbooks, which sometimes use simplified or structured language, movie expose learners to a real-life communication.
Yeah, it's way more fun than textbook, right?
Yeah, exactly. They have communication, and they also have natural pronunciation, different accents, informal expressions, and even slang. So, Saief, in your opinion, how exactly can movies help learners improve their English skills?
So first, thank you, Afif. In my opinion, one of the most obvious benefits of using movies for language learning is obviously for vocabulary development. Because when learners watch movies, they are constantly exposed to new words and phrases in context and also some slang. It actually makes it easier for them to understand the meaning and remember the vocabulary because they learn it in a fun way instead of a boring learning techniques by using such textbooks and the traditional way to learn English. And for example, in action movies such as Marvel films, viewers are often exposed to words related to conflict teamwork because it's an action movie, right?
Yeah.
Words like mission, strategy, or threat that are frequently used because these words are repeated throughout the movie, which learners are more likely to remember them. In addition, movies are also help learners to understand how words are used in different situations. This is actually very important because knowing the meaning of a word is not enough actually. As a learners, they also need to know when and how to use it appropriately in their writing, speaking, or even like
In their daily life.
their daily life conversation or what.
In different contexts.
Yeah. Exactly.
How about you, Soong?
Well, your perspective, I absolutely agree with. So I would like to add my perspective as well. So movies, they are also very useful for improving your pronunciation and listening skills. Because when they watch movie, they can hear how native speakers pronounce those words, including the stress, intonation, and also the rhythm of the language. And the point is that this is something that is very difficult to learn from textbooks alone, because by listening to dialogues in movies, learners can imitate the way words are spoken, and by this, gradually improves their pronunciation. So, I would like to provide an example. As you can see, in many Hollywood movies, right, characters speak at a natural speed, which helps learners get used to real-life conversations. Yes, although many people might be difficult at first, with repeated exposure, learners can improve their listening comprehension significantly. And what do you think of my point of view, Afif?
Yeah, that is a very good point. So, I agree with you on the fact that pronunciation and listening are indeed an essential skill, especially in language learning. So, in addition to that, I believe movies can also help learners develop their speaking skills. So, when learners watch movies, they are exposed to many different types of conversations. The first type is casual conversations between friends. Second, formal discussions. And third, emotional dialogues. So, by observing these three interactions, learners can learn how to respond appropriately in different situations. So, I'll give you an example. So, for instance, right, learners can practice repeating lines from movies, like you said, which is a technique often known as shadowing. So, basically, this technique that is called shadowing can help them improve their fluency, pronunciation, and confidence when speaking in English and having conversation with someone.
I think you have a good point, and I agree with that. Another important benefit of using movies is that they provide cultural exposure. Language is actually closely connected to culture, and in order to fully understand a language, learners also need to understand the cultural context behind it. Through movies, learners can observe social norms, values, and behaviors of people from different cultures. For example, in many Western movies, you can see how people greet each other, express emotions, or handle conflicts. It's a difference, right? There's a difference there.
Yeah, true.
And this kind of cultural understanding is very important because it helps learners to avoid misunderstandings when communicating with others. It also makes the learning process more meaningful and interesting because we understand how some culture talk, communicate, and communicate with each other using language, sign language, and body language, and something like that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You think you agree with me, Sean?
Yeah. Well, from what I've observed so far, that is very, very true. And I would also like to add that movies can also increase learners' motivation. You see, compared to traditional learning methods, watching movies is obviously more enjoyable and less stressful. And this makes learners more willing to engage with the target language. Like for instance, right, students may feel bored when memorizing vocabulary from a textbook in a robotic manner, but they may feel excited when watching a movie that they enjoy.
Yes, because we don't need to read, right? We just need to watch and
Yes.
hear the audio and all.
And it's like they are watching the movie but learning the language second. And ironically, this makes language learning more effective. And this positive emotional experience can motivate them to continue learning. And in addition, because movies they come in different genres, which means that learners can choose content that matches their interests. And this absolutely makes the learning process more personalized and effective. And do you think you agree with my points, Afif?
So next, that is the end of our discussion. So now that we have discussed both the evolution of movies and their role in language learning, I believe it's time for us to move into a more interactive discussion. So I would like to start with a question for both of you and also for the audience. So do you think movies are truly effective as a primary tool for language learning, or should they only be used as a supplementary resource? So as for me personally, I believe that movies are a very powerful, but they may not be as sufficient on their own without proper guidance. So now I will know what's your point on this.
That's actually a very interesting question, Afif. In my opinion, movies are extremely effective, especially because they expose learners to authentic language use. For example, when students watch movies, they can hear natural pronunciation, informal expressions, and even slang, which are often not taught in textbook and in classrooms. However, I agree with you that movies alone are not enough. Without structured learning, students might misunderstand certain phrases or fail to grasp the grammatical rules behind them. Let me give a simple example. Like a student might hear a phrase like "What's up?" in a movie and understand it as a greeting, but they might not know when it is appropriate to use it. They might use the slang "What's up" to their teachers or people elder than themselves. This
and disrespectful gestures.
This shows that while movies provide exposure, teachers actually still play an important and crucial role in guiding the student itself.
What are your thoughts on this?
Well, that is a very interesting perspective. So I would like to add to that point. My opinion is that movies, they are highly effective, but their effectiveness depends on how they are used. Because if they watch movies in a passive manner, they might only focus on the entertainment and not actually learn much. However, if they design activities around movies, such as vocabulary exercise, or maybe discussions, or role playing, then movies, they have the potential to become a very powerful learning tool. And I would like to give another example. You see, teachers, right? They can pause a scene and ask students to predict what will happen next. Or they can ask students to repeat certain lines to practice pronunciation. And these activities, they encourage active learning rather than just passive watching. So yeah, I suppose that concludes my point. So I would like to hear your perspective on this topic, Afif.
Thank you very much, Soong. and I would say that is a really good point from you. So basically, to conclude everything, we can say that the effectiveness of movies depends on the learning approach, right?
Yeah.
So, as for me, I also think that motivation also plays a crucial role here. Compared to traditional learning, traditional learning methods, I believe that movies are a much more engaging and enjoyable way for students, as they will more than likely to pay attention when they are watching something interesting rather than reading from a traditional textbook. So let me ask another question. Do you think certain types of movies are better for language learning than others? Let me give an example. So, would you recommend animated films like, let's say, Spider-Verse, Spider-Man movies, right? Maybe action movies, or perhaps maybe something like documentaries, what are your thoughts on this? What is your perspective?
That's a great question, Afif. Give me a moment. I think it really depends on the learner's level and goals itself.
Yeah.
For beginners, like the early stage children, like the primary school students, animated movies might be more suitable because the language is usually simpler and clearer. They focus more on visuals, and the character often speak more slowly, and the storyline is easier to follow. And on the other hand, for more advanced learners like us or the secondary school students, movies with complex dialogue such as dramas or even superhero films can be more beneficial. Like you said just now, Spider-Man.
Yeah.
These movies expose learners to wider range of vocabulary and more conversations. However, they can also be more challenging, especially if the characters speak quickly or use a lot of idiomatic expression that is hard for the learners to understand.
Yeah, that's true.
What you say?
Well, I do agree with your points, and I would like to propose a suggestion, which is learners, they choose movies based on their interests. Now this is very important, because if a student, if they enjoy action movies, they are more likely to stay engaged and motivated while learning. For example, many students, they enjoy watching superhero movies because of the exciting scenes and strong characters. However, we must also notice that there is also a limitation here. Now, action movies, they sometimes focus more on visuals than dialogue. So as a result, learners may not get as much language input compared to other genres, which is why it is extremely crucial to have a balanced approach when selecting movies for your learning journey. And I suppose that concludes my point so far. So for now, I think let's give it over to Afif, shall we?
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, I completely agree with both of your guys' points. So, that's true, and I think this is where teacher plays an important role again. So, teachers has to guide students in selecting appropriate movies and designing activities that maximize learning. As Saief said and Soong said, role playing and such. And teachers can also assign specific scenes for analysis, or even ask the students to summarize the plot in their own words. Next, I also want to bring in another aspect, which is cultural understanding. As you all know, movies don't just teach language, right? They also expose learners to different cultures, ethnicity. And do you think this is an advantage, or could it sometimes be, confusing for learners? I would like to ask Saief about his opinion. What do you think?
For me, I think it is definitely a big advantage because language and culture are actually closely connected because different culture have a different language, different slang and act. And so understanding cultural context actually could help learners to use the language more appropriately and accurately with the point out. For example, certain expression or behaviors in movies reflect cultural norms which students might not learn from textbooks.
Yeah.
However, I also agree that it can sometimes be confusing. Why? Because learners might misunderstand cultural references or assume that that everything they see in the movies reflects real life situation and they can apply it into the real life situation. This is why teachers, the role of teachers, they need to explain and clarify these cultural elements with their students. Do you agree with me, Soong?
Yes, I do completely agree with what you said just now. Now, my point is that movies, they provide valuable cultural exposure, but at the same time, they also require what we call critical thinking. So students, they should be encouraged to question what they see and discuss it with others. For example, teachers, they may ask questions like, do you think this behavior is realistic? Or how would this situation be different in your culture? And this kind of discussion not only improves language skills, but also develops students' critical thinking abilities, which is an important goal in our education system. And so yeah, that's what I think about this issue. So, do you think my idea is accurate?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Soong. So, from our discussion, we now see that movies are not just a tool for language learning, but it is also a way to develop critical thinking and cultural awareness. So, before we wrap up this discussion, I'd like to ask one final question to both of you and also to the audience. So, if you had to recommend one strategy for using movies effectively in language learning, what would it be? Let's start by asking Saief, what is your perspective on this, and please give us your opinion.
For me, the most important strategy would be active engagement. Students should not just watch movies passively, and they should take notes, learn new vocabulary, and try to use what they have learned in real life situations. This actually makes the learning process more meaningful and effective. That's a short and simple opinion from me.
I see. So, that is a very refreshing perspective on the issue. So, I would like to add that consistency is also the key to this topic, because watching one movie is definitely not enough to significantly improve your language skills, at least in a way that show progress, right? So, it is necessary for students to watch regularly and practice in a consistent way. And over time, they can become more familiar with the language, and naturally, their listening and speaking skills will improve bit by bit. So, do you think my point stands in this context, Afif? What do you think?
True.
Practice makes perfect, right?
True. Repetition will also naturally improve the student skills. Naturally. So, as for me, I would emphasize the importance of combining movies with structured learning. So, as for me, I believe movies are a great tool, definitely. But they should be used together with other methods, such as grammar exercises, speaking practice, and perhaps classroom discussions. So, to conclude this discussion, we can say that movies are a powerful and engaging tool for language learning. but their effectiveness depends on how they are used. So with the right approach, they can not only enhance language skills but also cultural understanding and also critical thinking. Alright, now let's move on to our conclusion. So to conclude our discussion today, I think it is clear now that movies play a unique and important role, in both education and entertainment. Especially from their early beginnings as silent black and white films to the nowadays complex visual stunning blockbusters of today. With the CGI and stuff, movies have evolved tremendously. They are no longer just a source of amusement, but a medium that can educate, inspire and even influence social thinking. I believe movies allow audience to experience stories from a different perspective, explore new cultures, and gain insights into perhaps human behavior and societal issues. So now I would like to ask for Saief conclusion and what does he think about it?
Exactly, Afif. One of the key takeaways from our presentation is that movies are actually particularly valuable for language learning because they provide authentic input that textbooks often cannot do. Through movies, learners are exposed to natural speech, like idiomatic expressions, accents, and varying levels of formality in language use. Watching films could encourage learners to pay more attention to pronunciation, intonation, and context, which are crucial for developing both listening and speaking skills. In addition, movies make learning, of course, more enjoyable, which increases motivation and engagement, which a factor that is often underestimated in traditional language learning methods.
Yeah, that is true.
I want to hear your point.
Well, I believe that your conclusion is very precise and as well as very relevant to our topic today. So, as for my conclusion, so for my part, I think it is important for me to highlight the cultural aspect of movies. Now, films, they are windows in different societies, traditions, as well as worldviews. So by watching movies, learners gain not only language skills, but also cultural awareness. Understanding context, customs, and social norms depicted in the films helps learners use language more appropriately and effectively. For instance, seeing how people interact in a social setting in a movie helps learners understand politeness levels, humor, or even body language cues that are difficult to grasp from a textbook alone. So yeah, I suppose that concludes my summary of our debate today. So I'll give it to Afif now.
Okay, yeah, absolutely, Chong. So, moreover, movies cater to a wide range of learning styles. There are visual learners, may benefit from the rich imagery and cinematography. There may be auditory learners, which is me, moving from listening to dialogues and background sounds. And even keen aesthetic learners, they may engage through activities like acting out scenes or mimicking pronunciation. I believe this versatility makes movies a more flexible and adaptive tool in both formal classroom settings and informal self-study. So yeah, what about you, Saief?
Is there what I would like to add some point which is another point to consider is accessibility. With the rise of digital platforms and streaming services, movies are easier to access. It's like more accessible than ever before. It's easier for us to find the movies nowadays, right? Students no longer have to rely solely on cinemas or DVDs. like they can watch films anytime and anywhere they want. This flexibility supports continuous exposure to language, which is essential for language acquisition. It also allows learners to choose film that match their interests, whether that be action, comedy, or drama or documentaries, which further enhances engagement and learning outcomes. For me, I love to watch action movies.
True. It's easy to watch movies nowadays in Netflix, Disney Plus. We have many type of apps that we can watch movies
Yeah,
online
the
now.
sources are
There are
like
multiple
super varied.
platforms that provided nowadays.
Yeah, true.
The sources are very diverse.
And the choice we can choose this app and another app. A lot of option.
What about you, Soong?
So yeah, this ties in perfectly with the importance of structured use. While movies provide valuable exposure, they are most effective when used alongside guided learning. So teachers and learners, they can design activities like vocabulary exercises, scene analysis, role play, or even discussion questions based on the film.
Yeah.
Such strategies, they ensure that students actively engage with the language rather than passively watching, which maximizes the learning potential of movies. So we just have to understand that just watching those movies in a passive manner doesn't really help with our language learning. So what about you, Afif?
Yeah, that's true. One more thing. We also want to emphasize the motivational aspect. You know, movies have a really unique way of capturing attention, sparking curiosity and inspiring learners. Students are often more willing to participate in discussions, practice new vocabulary, or even attempt speaking exercises when motivated by something they enjoy. Movies can therefore be both an educational and emotional bridge for students, connecting language learning with learners' personal interest and cultural engagement. Like you said, Saief enjoy watching action movies. So do I. So Saief, can you add more to it?
I think finally, for me, movies also offer various opportunities for collaborative learning, like group discussions, peer teaching, and shared analysis of film themes, encourage interaction and communication among learners. These collaborative environments strengthens not only our language proficiency but also our critical thinking skills, empathy, and our social understanding. Learners get the chance to interpret stories, reflect on characters' choices, and consider different perspectives, which are all valuable cognitive and cognitive skills that can be applied to our daily life. Yeah.
True. I agree with you. So, what about you?
So, my takeaway is that to summarize all this, movies they are and should be considered to be a multifaceted tool in education because they enhance language acquisition, they foster cultural awareness, they motivate learners, and most importantly, they provide opportunities for critical thinking and collaboration. So whether used in classrooms or for independent study, movies have the ability to bridge the gap between learning and enjoyment. And this can make the language learning experience more effective and memorable. So all of this, they are very crucial to the language learning journey. So, Afif, what do you think?
So to summarize our whole discussion, and now we know and hope that today's discussion has shown that movies are much more than entertainment. They are educational, culturally enriching and engaging. So, I believe by integrating movies into language learning thoughtfully and creatively, teachers and learners can unlock new dimensions of understanding, motivation and communication. So, let us continue to explore films not just for their stories, but for the lessons they carry, the cultures they reflect, and the skills they help us develop. That's all from us. Thank you. I would like to thank Soong and Saief for joining us. Thank you very much.